I've got a concern. After all the years that I've logged for 35 years on my own. My daddy logged, his daddy logged, and his daddy logged.
The man millions watched on Swamp Loggers almost became a murderer long before the cameras arrived. Bobby Goodson looked like the toughest and most disciplined boss on Discovery Channel.
Us loggers in North Carolina, we're hurting right now, and we need some help. And we are farmers, and we've never asked for help before, but this is a time that we need it, and I hope y'all can work out something for us.
But behind that image was a past filled with addiction, violence, and a night he later admitted could have ended in him becoming a murderer.
With the water down and the land drying out, after a stellar 2 months, Bobby and the crew decide to switch tracks.
By the time the series disappeared from television, the story viewers thought they knew was only part of the truth.
We also visit Georgetown and Lumberton Mills, and we also have a few other surprises.
So, what really happened to Bobby Goodson after Swamp Loggers ended? And what parts of his life did the cameras never fully show? Join us as we uncover the truth about what happened to Bobby Goodson, the man nobody expected to end up on television. Before we get into what happened after the show, let's get straight about who Bobby Goodson actually is. Because the version that aired on Discovery Channel, the no-nonsense, God-fearing, hard-working patriarch who ran his logging crew like a tight military unit, was real. But it was also the final chapter of a story that started in a far darker place. Bobby Goodson was in Jacksonville, North Carolina. He came from logging stock 4 generations deep. His grandfather had 7 sons, 6 of whom ran their own logging crews. Bobby's father ran one too. By the time Bobby was 11 years old, he was spending summers working the woods alongside his father as actual labor in one of the most physically punishing industries in America. Logging gets into you early when it's all you've ever known. Bobby said it best himself. Once it gets in your blood, it's hard to get out. But alongside that inheritance of hard work and generational purpose came something else. Bobby was a kid who fell in with older kids, and the older kids in his world ran on alcohol and drugs. By the time Bobby was in 5th grade, he was showing up to school drunk. He has said in interviews that looking back over his life, he could not remember a single day he had gone without getting high or drinking or using some kind of substance. That is not a man exaggerating a colorful past for television effect. That is a man describing a daily reality that started before most children hit double digits. At 13, Bobby met Lori Mueller. She was the same age. They were volatile together from the beginning. Explosive arguments, emotional cruelty, the kind of friction that often develops between 2 young people who have no stable emotional foundation to build anything healthy on. By 16, they had their first child, a son named Justin. They married 5 years later. Bobby's own brother, in the brutal honesty that only siblings offer, took bets at the wedding that Bobby would kill her within a year. He almost proved the bet right. One night, Bobby came home drunk, which, by his own account, was the default state of most evenings in that period. Lori tried to wake him from where he'd passed out. He came out of it in a rage. Lori later described being grabbed by the throat, her head slammed into the wall, the phone ringing, and Bobby answering it calmly while she lay on the broken bed, choking out words to her father on the other end of the line. The next morning, Bobby woke up to a house with doors knocked off hinges, holes in walls, a destroyed television set, and no memory of any of it. He told CBN News directly. He could have killed her that night. He didn't know where his son was. He knew, looking at the wreckage of his own home, that something had to change, or it was all going to end very badly. That Sunday, Bobby and Lori went to church. Bobby prayed. He told CBN that the moment he walked out of that church, the craving for alcohol was gone. Just gone. He didn't attribute it to willpower, or a program, or a decision. He attributed it to God, flatly and without decoration, the same way he talked about cutting timber, as a fact, not a performance. The following week, Lori gave her life to Christ in the same church. They were baptized together, and the marriage that everyone had bet against held. That transformation, real, documented, described in Bobby's own words across multiple interviews, is the invisible foundation under everything you watched on Swamp Loggers. The man running that crew, taking care of those workers, refusing to manufacture drama for television cameras, was not who he had been in his 20s. He had already been through the hardest thing he ever faced before a single camera showed up. So how did a swamp logger from Jacksonville, North Carolina, end up on national television in the first place? And what happened when the reality of being on Discovery Channel turned out to be nothing like what he expected? How the show started, and what Bobby didn't know he was walking into. Bobby Goodson agreed to do Swamp Loggers for a reason that is almost charming in how far it is from calculated career strategy. He told reporters he wanted to share his love of logging with his grandchildren. He wanted a record of what the family business actually looked like, of what it meant to work those swamps. He thought it would be one guy with a camera following the crew around. When he pulled up on the first day of filming, 4 SUVs were parked at his operation. 12 or 13 people poured out, along with cameras, lights, and a large white reflector board. Bobby has said his first thought was, "What have I gotten myself into?" The answer, as it turned out, was something considerably more complicated than a family logging documentary. Pilgrim Films, the production company behind the show, with executive producers Craig Pelagian, Tim Pastore, and Edward Barbini running the operation, was not making a quiet documentary about North Carolina timber culture. They were making a Discovery Channel reality series, which means they were making entertainment. And entertainment, in the reality television economy of 2009, had a formula. Find genuine people doing genuine work, film everything, and in the editing room, build tension, drama, and stakes out of whatever material you have. Swamp Loggers premiered on June 15, 2009, and it worked. Viewers connected with Bobby, with son Justin, with the crew, with the specific textures of eastern North Carolina swamp work, the equipment pulling free from mud, the load quotas, the weather that could dissolve a week's work in an afternoon. The show was not trying to be anything other than what it was, and audiences could feel that. It ran 4 seasons across 37 episodes. Bobby and the crew became recognizable faces across the country. But here is what was happening behind the cameras that eventually ended it. By the time Season 4 was in production, Discovery's production team wanted more. Not more logging footage, not better access to the operation's technical complexity, more drama, more conflict, more of what every other successful cable reality show was generating to hold audience attention in an increasingly crowded television landscape. Bobby was told directly that they wanted the show to feature more fighting and more interpersonal conflict between crew members. Bobby's response was equally direct: "I'm not willing to do that." Discovery announced the cancellation in February 2012, just weeks after the Season 4 finale. They gave no official reason. Bobby said publicly that he was surprised, but noted it would be considerably easier to get work done without a production crew in the way. Justin said the crew was pretty much the same, whether they were filming or not. What Bobby told local reporters was the truth that the network never acknowledged. The company had not signed on for more episodes because they were asked to do more than cut trees. He wasn't going to manufacture dysfunction in a crew that actually functioned. That was his line. He didn't cross it. It is worth sitting with that for a moment. Bobby Goodson, a man who had spent years building something real out of the ruins of a very destructive personal history, was not about to introduce performed chaos into the one thing he had built with integrity. The show ended because he refused to betray what made it worth watching in the first place. So, the cameras left. The logging continued. And for 10 more years, the man that America had briefly watched grind through the Carolina swamps kept grinding, until everything he had built hit something he couldn't chainsaw his way through. The decade nobody filmed, and the perfect storm that built quietly. From 2012 to 2022, Goodson's all-terrain logging kept operating. Bobby and Justin ran the company together, the fifth generation now actively involved, grandchildren starting to show interest in the trade. The logging business that had always been the point, not the television show, but the actual work of pulling timber out of eastern North Carolina's waterlogged terrain and delivering it to mills, kept running. Bobby had built the operation in 1986 with a clear-eyed understanding of what swamp logging demanded. The equipment had to be specialized, skidders and feller bunchers configured to function in terrain that would swallow conventional machinery. The trucks had to be maintained rigorously because a fleet breakdown in a remote swamp didn't mean calling a repair shop down the street. The crew had to be reliable because the work was genuinely dangerous, and nobody could afford a weak link in conditions where the ground could shift under heavy equipment without warning. By his own account, the company was running approximately 92 truckloads of wood per week at its operational peak. 700 to 800 miles of truck travel per day across the fleet. That is an enormous logistics operation, and it operated for nearly 4 decades on margins that were always thin. Logging is not a business where the people at the bottom of the supply chain set the price. The mills set the price. Loggers take what they're offered, or they park the equipment. There has never been significant pricing power at the harvesting end of the timber supply chain, and that structural disadvantage sat under everything Bobby built for 37 years. What happened in 2020, 2021, and into 2022 was not one thing. It was, as Bobby put it, a perfect storm. And he is being precise with that phrase, not dramatic. First, the COVID-19 pandemic created equipment shortages across every industry that relies on heavy machinery. Parts became unavailable or delayed by months. New trucks that had been on order couldn't be delivered. The operation was running aging equipment longer than was operationally sound because there was no replacement pathway. Second, labor, always a challenge in an industry where the work is physically brutal and the pay is modest, became dramatically harder to retain or replace as the broader labor market tightened across every sector. Third, and ultimately the killing blow, diesel fuel prices exploded. Bobby's fleet ran on diesel. Every truck, every piece of swamp equipment, every mile of those 700 to 800 daily miles burned diesel. Before the crisis, Bobby was paying approximately $1.99 per gallon. By mid-2022, that number had hit $5.50. He told Southern Logging Times magazine in detail his trucks were burning 68% of the operation's profits in the fuel tank. He was operating a multi-million-dollar enterprise on a 2 to 3% profit margin in the best of times. At 68% fuel cost, there was no margin. There was a loss. Every single day. He spent 2 years trying to hold on. He told the Epoch Times he had identified the trajectory and knew he couldn't survive another year at the rate the losses were accumulating. He made the decision in the spring of 2022 to close on his terms, while the equipment was still in reasonable shape and worth something, rather than wait until the losses had consumed everything. In May 2022, Bobby posted a video to YouTube announcing the closure. Standing next to Lori, he explained what had happened and what it meant. The video moved through the logging community like a shock wave, not just because Bobby Goodson was a recognizable face, but because what he described was happening to logging operations across the entire country. Within days of the announcement, he said dozens of other loggers reached out to tell him the same forces had already closed their operations or were about to. The American Loggers Council issued a press release citing Bobby's closure as a visible data point in an industry-wide crisis. Their executive director stated plainly that more shutdowns would follow. He was right. Mills in Michigan and Maine were reportedly running low on wood. Companies across the South were parking equipment they couldn't afford to operate. The grassroots of a $300 billion American industry were failing, while the mills, which Bobby noted were reporting strong profits, continued to set prices that absorbed none of the cost increases their suppliers were drowning in. Bobby asked a question in his announcement that nobody in the industry had been able to answer for decades. We are the people that hold up a $300 billion industry. Why are we having to fight tooth and nail for every nickel we get? That question didn't get an answer. Goodson's all-terrain logging closed. 37 years, 4 generations of family logging tradition done. But the legacy remains evergreen. The legacy he built that nobody can auction off. After the equipment was sold and the operation was formally closed, Bobby said something that cut through every piece of industry analysis and business commentary about the closure. He said, "I'm fixing to find out what life looks like, because I'm selling my equipment now." For a man who had been logging since he was 11 years old, who had built his identity around the work and the crew and the responsibility of keeping both running, that admission contained everything. But here is what Bobby Goodson still has that the closure of the business couldn't touch. The company Facebook page still gets updated. The fan base that built around swamp loggers never fully dispersed. The show continues airing in reruns on Quest in both the United States and the United Kingdom, finding new audiences more than a decade after the final episode. Bobby maintains a public presence, has appeared at industry events, including the Mid-South Forestry Equipment Show, as recently as 2018 as a brand ambassador for TigerCat Industries, one of the leading manufacturers of specialized forestry machinery. His estimated net worth is approximately $3 million, accumulated across nearly 4 decades of hard operating work, a television run, and careful management of a business that never had enormous margins, but that he ran without catastrophic debt. The marriage that his brother gave a year before it would end in death is still standing. Bobby and Lori Goodson have been together since they were 13 years old. They have 2 children, Justin and Brittany, and 5 grandchildren who, by Bobby's own description, go to church every week. The cycle of violence and addiction that defined Bobby's early life was stopped cold in a church in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and it has not resumed. That is not a small thing. That is, arguably, the most significant achievement of his entire life, more significant than any load quota or television rating. Justin Goodson, 5th-generation logger, Bobby's right hand through every season of the show and every year of the operation, also closed down when the family business did. But the knowledge doesn't go away with the equipment sale. A man who grew up in a feller buncher, who holds a degree in diesel mechanics, who spent his formative years learning how to keep complex machinery operational in conditions designed to destroy it, carries all of that forward regardless of whether there's a company name on a truck door. What the industry itself is facing is a harder question. Bobby warned in 2022 that a severe logger shortage was coming if something drastic didn't change. The structural problem he identified, that mills hold all the pricing power and loggers absorb all the cost volatility, has not been resolved. The American Loggers Council has been making the same argument to Congress and the timber industry for years, and the mills have largely continued to operate on a take-it-or-leave-it basis with their suppliers. Bobby Goodson's closure was not just the end of one man's business, it was a visible warning signal about the sustainability of the entire harvesting end of the timber supply chain. Whether that warning changes anything remains to be seen. What is not in question is what Bobby Goodson built and what he proved. He proved that a man who went to school drunk in the 5th grade, who raised a child at 16, who came within one phone call of killing his wife during a blackout, that man could build something lasting, run it with integrity, refuse to compromise it for television ratings, and close it on his own terms when the economics left him no choice. He proved it across 37 years of work that started before most people are old enough to know what they want to do with their lives. What do you think? Did Bobby Goodson win or lose in the end? Was the incident with his wife the only reason why he decided to change his way of life? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.